Imagine this, the glimmering lights of the disco period of the 1917s, the roar of loving fans, and the sparkling appeal of ABBA's catchy tunes and how they reverberate through concert halls. There was, however, a simmering tension that was concealed beneath layers of sequins and polished performances, which was masked behind the brilliant grins and legendary harmonies. The world is shocked today because Frida has shown a new side of Agnetha. She has pulled back the curtain on years of fights, controversies, and personal challenges that very few people have had the courage to acknowledge for themselves. The relationship between Frida and Agnetha was anything from amicable, despite the fact that the harmonies of ABBA blended together without any friction. In many instances, Frida, the fiery, passionate brunette with a flaming temper, and Agnetha, the restrained blonde with a propensity for perfectionism, found themselves in conflict with one another. They were like oil and water in terms of their personalities. Frida's energetic stage presence stood in stark contrast to Agnetha's more measured and controlled approach, and tensions were rising behind the scenes as a result. The disagreements between them were not solely based on creative differences. According to reports, Frida became irritated by Agnetha's insistence on isolating herself during tours and her tendency to isolate herself from others. On the other hand, Agnetha frequently separated herself from the band, which contributed to the escalation of a cold war inside the group. There was more to this than merely a difference in creative approaches. On a personal level, it was a conflict that stemmed from feelings of bitterness, envy, and unspoken grievances. Agnetha is portrayed as tough and even manipulative by Frida's recent admissions. She frequently takes use of her vulnerabilities in order to gain sympathy, while also quietly undermining those who are around her. The problems that Agnetha was having did not end with ABBA. Her private life was a whirlwind of failed relationships, conflict within her family, and emotional instability. Agnetha fell into a cycle of sadness and loneliness after her divorce from Bjorn Ulvaeus, which received a lot of public attention. It was difficult for her to cope with the disintegration of her family, and she fought with feelings of abandonment and uncertainties. As she struggled to maintain a healthy balance between her popularity and her role as a mother, her relationship with her children grew strained. Her love life consisted of a string of turbulent relationships, each of which resulted in unhappiness for her. And very scandalous relationship featured a younger guy named Thomas Sonnenfeld, who had a brief romantic involvement with Agnetha. However, their relationship ended in a tragic manner, leaving Agnetha profoundly devastated. However, the most peculiar part of the story was perhaps when she became involved with a Dutch stalker named Gert van der Graaf. Even despite legal interventions, Agnetha was unable to break free from his compulsive grip, which converted their uneasy dynamic into a real-life thriller. It was because of this peculiar relationship that Agnetha's vulnerability and poor judgment were brought to light, which caused headlines and eyebrows to grow across Europe. It wasn't simply Frida who Agnetha was at conflict with. Her interactions with other prominent players in the music industry were also fraught with tension. Her tendency to be controlling and her unwillingness to compromise were two of the reasons that producers and managers frequently considered her to be difficult to collaborate with. When she refused to give in to the pressures of the business world, she found herself in conflict with record executives over artistic control. Despite the fact that her obstinacy helped her maintain her artistic integrity, it also caused her co-workers to feel isolated and contributed to her reputation as a temperamental person. Conflicts would arise in recording studios as a result of Agnetha's insistence on several retakes, which she would stress over insignificant elements, which would leave producers feeling irritated. Because of her inability to take constructive criticism, the environment was heavy with tension, and those who worked with her were walking on eggshells out of fear of doing something that would set off her explosive anger. Some others asserted that she had an unusual ability to harbor resentment, which included the ability to transform little disagreements into long-lasting feuds. Despite the fact that she was working independently, Agnetha had a difficult time maintaining strong professional ties. Even while her individual endeavors were successful, they were tainted by conflict that occurred behind the scenes. Her co-workers described her as irritable and erratic, and her tendency for perfectionism frequently manifested itself as paranoia. She had a talent for driving people away, her emotional walls having been strengthened by years of being alone due to the celebrity she had achieved. It was said that she had unexpected changes of heart, which resulted in intense disputes during studio sessions, doors slamming, and projects being abruptly halted. According to the whispers, these incidents occurred. When she was excited one moment, she became aloof and distant the next, leaving those around her perplexed and fatigued all at the same time. It was not just in creative circles that she harbored mistrust. The fact that she refused to participate in promotional efforts and had a contemptuous attitude toward the media made her difficult to work with, according to business managers and publicists. Agnetha considered interviews to be intrusive interrogations, and her reserved responses were sometimes misunderstood as indications of arrogance. The distance that existed between her and the industry was only widened as a result of this, rendering her a loner who was impossible to collaborate with. Her solo career was a battleground that was strewn with broken professional connections, unfulfilled collaborations, and opportunities that she had lost due to her own fears. Behind the grandeur of her solo career was just a battlefield. The very characteristics that characterized her artistic ability turned out to be the obstacles that kept her from interacting with others, leaving behind a path of broken relationships and unsaid resentments. Agnetha did not fare well in the world of fame. A toll was taken on her mental health as a result of the strains of popularity, which included incessant touring and scrutiny from the media. Her anxiety was so terrible that she was afraid of flying, and she also experienced periods of sadness. Agnetha's fear of flying was so acute that it restricted the touring schedule of the band ABBA. This caused friction within the band, as well as anger from Frida, who considered that Agnetha's phobias were more about control than true fear. It was not merely a matter of personal preference for Agnetha to live a secluded lifestyle after ABBA. It was a requirement that arose from the precarious mental state that she was in. After she retired from the public glare, she moved to her Swedish island estate, where she lived in a state of near solitude. Her troubles were exacerbated by this solitude, which resulted in a vicious cycle of loneliness and paranoia that characterized her final years. She wandered through the echoing corridors of her home, haunted by memories of the past and tortured by the fear of being forgotten. The days turned into nights as she traveled through the chambers of her home. Anxiety and regret have become a prison that the once vibrant celebrity has created for herself, and she has become a shadow of herself as a result. Her thoughts were troubled by obsessive ideas and an overwhelming sense of dread, and she frequently found herself trapped in dark places in her mind. It felt like even the most basic of duties were insurmountable. Agnetha struggled with insomnia, and her sleepless evenings were filled with the echoes of distant acclaim, which now felt like a harsh reminder of a reality that she could no longer confront. As she continued to ignore calls from long-lost acquaintances, her phone began to accumulate dust. As a result, her relationships began to falter under the strain of her solitude. From that point on, the outside world turned into an adversary, a perpetual source of anxiety and suspicion. Every shot and every headline made her feel as though she was being invaded, and they robbed her of the last vestiges of her solitude. The emotional walls that she constructed were so high that not even the members of her family who were closest to her could climb over them. Agnetha was forced to contend with ghosts that she had created for herself as a result of the fact that the renown that had once brought her admiration had turned into a curse. For Agnetha, celebrity was a double-edged sword. It was a blessing that catapulted her to the forefront of worldwide recognition, but it was also a curse that robbed her of her feeling of normalcy. The very spotlight that had previously been her dream made her feel as though she was being suffocated by it, despite the fact that she had millions of followers who adored her. There was a striking contrast between the admiration of strangers and the emptiness that she experienced when the stage lights were turned down. Agnetha struggled with the duality of wanting to be connected and at the same time being afraid of being connected while she was alone in the private setting of her home. She had a strong desire for meaningful relationships, but she was wary of everyone who contacted her because she suspected that there were hidden agendas hiding behind every smile. Her days turned into a pattern of avoiding things, including avoiding calls, avoiding being around other people, and most sadly, avoiding herself. She frequently looked out her windows, watching the world go on without her. She felt as though she was stuck in the past, when the glory days of ABBA were both far away and cruelly present at the same time. The silence that she experienced was not tranquil. Rather, it was deafening, and it was replete with the echoes of what-ifs and could-have-beens. It was as if the empty rooms in her house were whispering memories of talks that she had left undone, of friendships that she had lost, and of love that she had let slip through her fingers like grains of sand. Her reflection in the mirror turned into the face of a stranger, serving as a daily reminder of the merciless passage of time and the solitude that she had chosen on purpose, but which she profoundly regretted. She felt as though she was being suffocated by the walls that had once shielded her from the craziness of the outside world. These walls seemed to be closing in on her with each passing day of silence. The contrast between the shouting throngs she previously reigned over and the hollow silence of her current existence was intolerable. It was a disturbing monument to the precarious nature of celebrity. The narrative of Agnetha is not just about the price of fame, but also about the excruciating burden of living in its wake, when the acclaim dies down, but the echoes continue to haunt every peaceful moment. Despite the fact that ABBA's music has stood the test of time, it is indisputable that their personal ties have become strained. Agnetha's tumultuous existence has been brought to light as a result of Frida's forthright admissions, which have revealed a legacy that is not just outstanding in terms of musical talent, but also marked by psychological turmoil. The narrative of Agnetha is one of opposites, with brilliant achievement being overshadowed by emotional upheaval, and a voice that entranced millions of people, all while concealing a heart that was scarred by strife and remorse. The world may have been dancing to the joyful choruses of ABBA, but behind the scenes, the music was accompanied by a darker, dissonant sound. Frida has finally had the courage to play this tune for everyone to hear. This song, which is intertwined with the acridity of betrayal, echoes the hidden fissures that are present within the shining facade formed by ABBA. The beauty and stardom were nothing more than masks that concealed a world in which friendships fell apart, love turned sour, and personal demons flourished in the shadows. Despite the fact that Agnetha's legacy is carved in the annals of music history, it is tainted by the stains of scandals, broken friendships, and the haunting echoes of choices made and roads not taken. Not only does the juxtaposition between the joyous rhythms that defined ABBA and the gloomy undercurrents of Agnetha's personal life build a portrait of a celebrity, but it also offers a vision of a woman who is trapped within her own legend. At the end of the day, it is a legacy that compels us to ask whether or not genuine success can ever be achieved without making sacrifices, and whether or not the price that Agnetha paid was worth the moments of recognition that were brief.